Last minute rushed video because I lost track of time a little bit. So today's Friday in America, West Coast and whatnot right now. Tomorrow is Patreon nominations. I just want to put this out here as a little PSA real quick because a thing that happens very often is that when a Patreon series is ending, people wait till the finale happens and they're like, oh man, I want to pick the next game. And the next game's already been chosen by then. Because if you wait for the finale to happen, well, I've probably already recorded the beginning of the next game already, because it's going to air tomorrow, the day after the finale, and all that. So I want to, boom, put this out, announcement and stuff, so on, especially since it's been like months since the last Patreon game was chosen, so it's a good time to like get it out there and explain it to people that are new here, because there's constantly like thousands of new people. If I were to estimate over the course of the Subnautica series, because of how long it was, there might be like 6,000 new people. They won't watch this video in their entirety, but you know. So, tomorrow, Saturday, December 8th, is when the Patreon nominations will begin. You have to already be in the correct Patreon tier if you want to participate in that category. That's the $15 tier. Nominations is how the games are chosen. Basically, people just... This is actually the form. Boom, boom, I'm showing it for once. This is the... I send you a thing like this each month, and you can like fill in your email address, which I already know on Patreon, and that's how I can verify which person it is. I do email because usernames are public, but as far as I can tell, emails are not. Although if I got duplicate emails entered from different people, then I'd have to verify which one's real, which would be very easy because I could just message the account of the real person. Then you just type in a game, basically. We'll have a talk back and forth a bit if said game is not really doable, but that's happened like twice over the last like 3 years or however long this Patreon's been open, so it doesn't really come up much. Admittedly, the games that people are really into are very often games that the world is interested in, so it often means that even if it is an older game, it probably has an HD release. But generally speaking, if it's on PlayStation 3, PlayStation 4, Wii, Wii U, Switch, Xbox 360, Xbox One, like all the modern consoles and last generation consoles / Wii is backwards compatible because it's the Wii U can play Wii games and I have a Wii U. All those work. PC games work because I have a PC. There's finagling involved in making the older games work sometimes, but you know, if it's not from those generations, it's easier if it has some sort of HD like pack that somebody made at some point. In many cases, handhelds are the main sticking point, is because I can't record handheld games without extensive hardware customization, which I might do one day, although the fact that the handhelds are all phasing out with Nintendo going to the Switch and the Vita dying means that might not happen so much. But a lot of games for older generations, I have like a PS2 and an Xbox right now, so I could technically acquire copies of older games if I have enough notice, which is part of the reason why I do this vote in advance, is that if that kind of stuff happens, I can acquire it. Generally, the kind of limitation that gets in the way is like no porn games, or things you can't put on YouTube, or no like music games where the music is licensed music, because the videos will not be uploadable. Or they'll be blocked in like 80% of countries from an episode by episode basis, depending on which songs are featured in each episode. It's a real mess. But pretty much basically everything anyone's ever nominated has been fine. I just ask that you be specific, because there are a lot of games there are some games that share names with each other, and there are also games where they bring back a franchise like Prey or God of War or Tomb Raider or so many other ones where they just use the old name again, like Hitman or Doom. You know, they just use the same name again when they bring the franchise back, and I'm like, okay, so when someone nominates Doom, do they mean 1993 Doom or 2016 Doom? And so I ask that you specify whenever possible. And if you don't even know if the game might have been reused, you could just, to be careful, no matter what game you're nominating, just put in parentheses the year it came out, just for the sake of safety, so I definitely know which game you're talking about. That's the nomination series. Significantly fewer people are involved in this particular tier, but that's the one that's happening tomorrow. That's the tightest deadline, so you gotta hop on the Patreon basically now if you want to be able to participate in that part, the part where you are actually saying a game that might be the next game after Subnautica, as opposed to voting on a poll that arrives. And to specify, we did have a poll recently, but that was me gathering information about demographics and whatnot and what interests you. And not only do the top things not necessarily get played immediately or in that order and whatnot, but I made the list myself. It was my choices as opposed to this being community choices. And also, I like have a whole bunch of subcategories where it actually a bunch of different things were competing with each other in different subcategories that I didn't expose, and I don't generally show the results publicly. It's just me, it's more information for me to use to pick what I'm going to play over the next few months, and it's to educate me as opposed to have a thing that wins the poll. But this is something where something wins the poll. Whatever wins is what I play next. So back to the original post on Patreon that explains this stuff. So Saturday is going to be the nominations. Generally speaking, these things happen around 1 p.m.-ish. I have to do it manually, live, and everything, so it happens approximately midday in Western California, Western United States, in California time, Pacific time. There's a nice window of error here where you don't, if you're confused about my time zone or whatever, it's not that big of a deal because I leave open a 48-hour period for nominations and a 48-hour period for voting, so you don't have to be like finger on the pulse, you just have to notice within the 2 days in order to participate. That's another reason why I do this so far in advance of the finale actually airing, because I want you guys to be able to actually keep up with it and everything. So, December 10th, Monday, that's going to be the vote. The vote looks like this. This is last time's vote. I'm like, hey, check this out. There's a little bit of information, and then here's a trailer for every single game that was nominated by the nominators this time around, except this was last time. And then once again, you verify who you are, and then you vote. You just click on every single one that you feel like doing, and then you hit submit. And also you can pick which one is your favorite or something. Do not take these clicks as indicative. I just clicked on random things, and then you submit. And basically, that's a little way of giving it an edge. There's been questions of the idea of like whether there's like other voting systems that are better. I like that I'm not doing first past the post or whatever, where you pick one option and then whatever the one option is that wins, because that leads to situations where like Final Fantasy 6 and 7 and Tactics, if they're all nominated at the same time, which they have been multiple times, compete directly with each other for votes, and they can sap each other's votes away, and then only the top one wins. So that means that in some cases it'd be the most unique winner that would win, as opposed to really the top winner. So being able to pick as many as you want, I think, is better than being able to pick one game, because of the fact that games like that would compete with each other, where I can just pick both Final Fantasy games and it doesn't matter. So that kind of thing's not there. And then there's the question of like, well, what about preference? Like, what if I wanted to give certain things more vote or something? And there are voting systems where you like rank the entire thing, but not only is that really a lot more difficult to implement on technical level, it's also not necessarily super user-friendly to have to rank every single game on some level. There's two versions of that. One is where you drag everything into being like an order based on what you prefer, and that's pretty unwieldy for a list this huge. The other is to rank everything like I want this game 1 to 10, but I don't like that idea, because it requires people to manufacture an opinion on a bunch of games they don't have an opinion on, basically, and that also feels weird. And also, once again, I think that's overcomplicating the form. I think this is a nice compromise between having a voting system that works, that doesn't make votes, certain nominations destroy each other, and also is understandable by the audience, and I don't get a bunch of emails of people being confused by the voting system because hundreds of people show up for this stuff at this point. And this is the one where you get top choice, which is that you get to pick one thing, and it just gets a little extra nudge on top of all the other ones you voted for. That's basically what's being handled there, and so that's been a little extra detail to add to the system. So that's basically how the voting works. You get both of these things via me sending you a message via Patreon. You cannot respond to that message if you get it if you get the email. One thing is you will get an email notification, which is very useful for being able to keep track of this stuff, so please whitelist the Patreon email and so on, or check on these days to see if they're in your junk folder and then whitelist them if they are, because that's a problem, obviously, if the emails are getting eaten up by your spam filter. But if you get the email, do not respond to the email. It's just an automated email. You need to go on Patreon and respond to me there if you're trying to respond to me. But you can click the link to the polls and forms and whatnot via the email. That does work as far as I'm aware. And yeah, you just put your answer in within the 48 hours of when it was sent to you. That becomes the result. So the people in phase 1 nominate the games. Those are the $15 tier. In phase 2, every single Patreon subscriber gets to vote on said games, which is self-explanatory a bit. And that's everybody down to the $1 tier. That's everyone included. The one exception is that there is, when you pledge to me, you can choose no reward as like a option. Keep an eye out for that. If you choose no reward, I assume you don't want to be involved in the polls and you don't want to be in the credits of the videos, because in my head I'm like, why else would people choose that option? But every now and then people tell me that they're confused about what's going on, and it turns out they're in the no reward tier and they must have gotten there accidentally. So just be sure to read the screen when you're signing up and just keep an eye out for those kinds of little mistakes. And because that, you know, I don't want people to be left out, but there are people in that tier that are there on purpose. Okay, so Saturday is the Patreon nominations, Monday is the vote, Tuesday is the finale, and then Wednesday is we're gonna have a special Subnautica event video thing. A while back on Twitter or something, you might have seen that I was like, no, let's try today. I ran out of time in my schedule, but because I was recording a multi-hour thing for later. That's that. And I'm not going to say anything else about that. It's just going to be a fun surprise on Wednesday, the final send-off of Subnautica. And then Thursday will be the next Patreon game, the one that comes as a result of this entire voting process and whatnot. That whole thing. In addition to this entire thing, if you're wondering about the Patreon itself, there's one additional reward on top of the whole being in the credits and being involved in this whole voting process, is that, oh, that's the front page of Patreon. I've made a horrible mistake. The one other thing going on here is there's the Q&A. So just so you know, there's a weekly Q&A series where I just do these things. Maybe skip part 18 and 19. Things got kind of political. I'm not totally psyched about that, but also it's been messy lately. But even if you skip over those, there's 17 other episodes, and I'm going to be recording a new episode right after I finish rendering this thing that you're watching right now, which will go up tomorrow, Saturday. So the same day as that the nominations begin, even if you're not involved in the nominations, it's worth hopping on Patreon if you want to, just to have access to this series, which is this, like, every week-ish. It's pretty much every week. I've only had occasional interruptions due to holidays and stuff, like once or twice. I upload like a usually 1 to 2 hour, sometimes even longer, Q&A video where I'm answering questions from the audience, which you can send to me via, like, can't really access it here, I don't think, because I'm in incognito mode to show like the audience perspective of this, but there's like a ... around here when you're subscribed to me that lets you send me a message directly, and when you send me a message directly, you can ask a question, and that'll be entered to my list of stuff to look at when I'm doing the Q&A series. And I try to prioritize any new names I see first, and I try to do one question per user per video a bit, and I'd bounce around, so I might not get to you for a few weeks or something. It might take a little bit, but I'm cycling through people to try to be as fair as possible, even though I'm also doing this long-winded podcast thing where any individual question will have me talking for like 40 minutes at times, potentially. Depends on the question a bit, but I've been doing this for a few months, so there is additional content on my Patreon. The reason why I think this is okay, because originally I was saying I'm not going to lock Let's Plays and stuff behind the Patreon. This is not really a Let's Play, in my opinion, or at least it's not the kind of content I normally make. I am playing a video game, but I'm not talking about said video game. It's basically out of habit. You guys are used to consuming my content while I'm playing video games, and I'm used to producing content for you guys while playing video games, so it's just me playing originally Diablo 2 and then eventually World of Warcraft, kind of absent-mindedly pressing buttons while talking a bunch, because that's what I'm used to doing. And that's just gonna keep going as long as I keep getting questions, basically. And if I run out of questions, I might just come up with podcast topics for all I know. But that's the Patreon, just giving you guys an update. I'm sorry, there might be a bit of a glut of Patreon-related videos lately where I'm talking about the Patreon. I'm not trying to shove it in the face constantly, but it's just I'm trying to get ahead of the fact that there is a miscommunication at times when a Patreon series is ending, or people try to hop on the Patreon after the series is ending, has already ended, and try to get involved in the next vote when the next vote, you know, when the game's already starting. It's a confusion that I think is unfortunate, but at the same time, I still think it's better than the alternative, which is to have every time a Patreon game ends, we just don't have Patreon videos for a whole week, because I have to do the entire nomination and voting process after it's over. I think that, like, having a whole week of videos be gone, it would be kind of a bummer. So I think it's better to do it in the preceding days instead. When do we do Patreon votes? It's chaotic. I do them when the game ends. So in a case like, as you might imagine, there's very different lengths between a game like Grim Fandango, or Subnautica, or Morrowind, or Papers, Please, which are all previous Patreon games, I think. I think they all were, yeah. We used to do a monthly schedule where we nominated one Patreon game per month. That led to two things. One, if the game was too short, that slot would just go away. Admittedly, I didn't have slots back then, so it didn't seem like that as big of a deal. But the worst thing was that a lot of games like Far Cry and Horizon Zero Dawn and Morrowind are longer than 1 month of footage. So for Far Cry, I had a vote where I was like, do we renew this for Season 2, basically, for a second month, or do I stop Far Cry 4 and vote for a new game? And I let people vote, and they voted for doing more Far Cry 4 until it was over, so we did that. Horizon Zero Dawn was the second game that was too long, and I was like, okay, this time I'm going to change the vote. Here's the new thing. Do you want me to change how Patreon works, so instead of being a monthly vote, we vote whenever it's time for a new game in that slot? And it won by a significant margin. I don't remember the real results exactly, but I think it was bordering on unanimous. So that's when we changed everything, and you guys immediately were like calling my bluff by immediately voting for Morrowind, which was like, I think, the longest Patreon game so far, but I could be wrong. I don't remember how it compares with Subnautica. So you guys immediately embraced the fact that it was no longer a monthly series, but just it's a however long the game is series. So that's Patreon. That's the voting structure. That's the current schedule. You have been warned, PSA and all that, and that's the additional content that's there. It's all happening. And if you don't care about any of this, it's fine, because you can just watch whatever game comes after Patreon. I mean, after Subnautica for free, because that'll just be coming up on that day I said. Thursday. Yeah, so look forward to the game after Subnautica on Thursday. Look forward to an extra long special Subnautica video on Wednesday. And you can be involved and support me and, you know, make this channel work, or you can just watch, and both are good because the viewership, your viewership itself promotes the videos, and you're always supporting me in some way if you're just sticking around and all of that. But yeah, the Patreon is definitely how I'm able to do this full time, because I do not have an especially large channel, and would not be able, and the moment I launched the Patreon, that kind of changed everything. Because this is like a disproportionate amount of success for a channel my size on Patreon, I suppose. So thank you guys for that. I didn't thank you guys enough for that for Thanksgiving. I was too distracted just trying to tell you guys that the new videos were coming out, and it'll be a multiplayer special Thanksgiving, and I was trying to warn you guys about the schedule change, and I didn't spend enough time thanking you guys on Thanksgiving because I was too busy trying to get to my family and all that other stuff. But this is a viewer supported channel. You guys did this. This being my full-time thing is your I almost said your fault. I mean, it's kind of your fault.